this was the reward that this man who, like I said before, saved the very democracy and government that then turned and punished him, that was what he got, that was the hand he was dealt. And I was so angry, so upset. And that grief was compounded with the realization that why on earth doesn't everybody know this story? Why don't people know about this man? Why is he not on the front cover of textbooks, not just science books, but history books? Wow. That was weird. We're having a normal conversation behind a curtain and suddenly 900 people. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We are so grateful that you have made time in a very busy schedule to be with this group that clearly has for you what I can only call profound admiration.
Thank you. Thank you.
A couple of questions, obviously, about the Imitation Game and your remarkable incarnation of Alan Turing, and maybe a few other questions about your career before we take a few from this audience. I'm sure you've been asked this before, but if you could tell us a little about what were the most challenging aspects of your preparation to play this man, and given that there was so much secrecy about Alan Turing during and after World War II, were there any filmed records of him? Was there anything that you could study that gave you a sense of his body, his mannerisms?
No, nothing. There's no filmed footage of him. There's no audio recording of him, but there is extensive anecdotal evidence of what he was like, how he moved, how he composed himself, how he changed around certain circles of people, what moved him, what he abhorred, how he would hold himself, his appearance and his clothes. But it's all anecdotal, so a lot of reading. And I was really fortunate to meet some of his surviving family who knew him during their lifetime. But the oldest member of that group was 16. With her last memory, but even that was very illuminating. They talked about a man who was incredibly respectful of them as human beings, who would treat them as adults, who didn't treat them as children, who treated them as equals, but they remembered being amused by him, feeling confident and happy when he was around them, and being amused by him. Like I said, he'd do extraordinary tricks of brilliance, like playing chess with his back to the board, and he'd tell them funny stories, and he is funny in himself sometimes, as you've seen in the film, accidentally, but also he also has a sense of humor. He can implement humor rather than be the subject of it, and that was a great hook into humanizing somebody who on the page has abilities and a sort of mental faculty which is so beyond, even the most profoundly intelligent of my breed as an actor. It's a very daunting thing when you look at what his mind gave the world. He was the father of the modern computing age. He was a man who, with algorithms, helped to crack the German Enigma code. He was a brilliant realizer of his theories with a team of mechanics and engineers, and a team, I hasten to add, someone who didn't work in isolation, someone who could work with groups of people, who understood people, but somebody who realized his ideas in a physical form. And so, that to me meant that he was somebody who, his ability to do all of these things, these algorithms I was talking about are still the same algorithms that are used in Google search engines, which is a weird loop of some kind of circular logic, because you put in his name now and it links me with him, which is going back to talking about the family. Very embarrassing. I actually apologized to them at the beginning of the London premiere, because it's a profoundly banal link to have. But as I always say, when I get the opportunity to speak to people who've seen this film, I'm only too proud to talk about him and it and be a spokesperson for somebody who would have abhorred being a spokesperson for himself, and who tragically in his own life was abused by a government and a democracy that he'd helped save from fascism and nationalism by being treated in the most terrifying, fear-formed manifestations of that form, prejudice and a fear of the other, and that scapegoating continues. But I'm going well off the topic of your answer. But the point is that this extraordinary being was very unattainable when you look at the pure math, the incredible brilliance of his mind. So anecdotal evidence from them was really important to be able to try and clue into my major hook for him, which was that he felt everything so keenly. Everything that he brought to us in his work, in his science, and in his achievements as a man on this earth was utterly linked to something that all of us have. It was about his environment. It was about language. It was about the people that he met. Everything that he experienced influenced his mind, which again sort of amplifies the volume of the tragedy of his death, because this world that he was born into, this incredibly fragile and sensitive child, first of all as someone who was born into an era between, just at the end or the middle of, during the First World War, but not affected by that. But his parents and the whole attitude of that time was still very Victorian. His parents were away in the part of the diplomatic rather, in India, and his mother was shocked to discover after a very long time away from him, when he was in foster care with this retired army couple, that she came back and his stammer had developed. He had a stammer. This child had a stammer. So even at that very early point, he obviously needed paternal love and craved a deeper care than he got. And that was very much a product of his time, not to denigrate the parents that looked after him or his own parents for what they were doing for their duty, for what they felt was right for their lives. But it really affected him, and to have a stammer now, let alone in that era, must have been an extraordinary handicap, to not be able to make social bonds, to not be able to make easy relationships through language and understanding, and being treated immediately as different by your contemporaries, by other children. And that just continued into his adolescence, when he discovered he was a homosexual man and had feelings for men rather than women. And the tragedy, so beautifully portrayed by the two boys in the film, by Alex Crowther, who's, for me, the real discovery of the film. Incredible performance. That's where you see him shift into the man that you meet in my incarnation of him at the first moment of the film, someone who closed himself off to the feelings of the world or the influence of the world because they were so damaging to him. But also spurred him, as the incredible correspondence between him and Christopher Morcom's mum testifies, spurred him to become the student, the incredibly hard-working mind and applied mind that he became. He realized that God, or the idea of soul, was beyond his belief. He felt at the beginning that he wanted to believe that because Christopher was such a real presence. Anyone who's ever experienced the grief of losing somebody who's incredibly dear to you, it's like a limb. You cannot believe it's not there when it first disappears. And he wanted to believe that there was a soul, some kind of afterlife, or way of believing that he was still present, and came to the conclusion slowly, as that grief cooled a little, that it wasn't, but he would keep it present by giving life to the legacy of this inspiring man, this inspiring love of his life, really, by working to be as good as Christopher was. He was a better student than him. He was more capable, a little older as well. And that tragedy gave us the incredible work ethic of the man. So all of these things that influenced him, they were things that a humble actor can relate to, that we can all relate to as receivers of stories as well as being storytellers. So that was very, very important. And I think, beyond that, yes, like I was saying, a lot of anecdotal evidence about his stammer and the way he would come to a word, and it wasn't plosives that he would stammer on. It wasn't hard consonants. It could be anything, and it was a weight. It was a difficult moment. It was a hard thing to have a conversation with him, but everyone not just tolerated it, but completely accepted it. It wasn't something that became a hindrance to people's enjoyment of him, fascination with him, and love of him. And that speaks for the brilliant people and the adoring people that he had around him, and how special they were as well. But no, it was, you know, I was watching a little bit backstage because I got here early, and you know, I just noticed things that, you know, the hand in the pocket, the sort of scans, the head at the side, his teeth, which were a fake set of teeth that I had in, the sort of outward, inward things that were very helpful in the research I did to try and kind of inhabit him were, although there wasn't something to literally impersonate or interpret through an embodiment through, you know, film or audio recording, I had a fair idea from people's accounts of him of what I was aiming towards. And like I said, the deeper discovery was what really motivated him, what this sensitive child was, and how the world around him affected him. And that's the thing that grew the inner life, my understanding of what was going on inside the man. Yeah, that was a long one. I saw this huge sheet of questions backstage, and I was like, just ask me one. It's late, I'm emotional.
No, but I have notes, they're not all questions, no. But I think what is remarkable that people in this audience, and when I saw it at the Telluride Film Festival, respond to, it's not just that you create a portrait of a genius and someone whose legacy is actually part of our daily lives, even if we didn't know his name. I mean, we call them computers now, as the end credits say. But you add to that the complexity of someone who, as Keira Knightley's character puts it, is a fragile narcissist, and who is arrogant, and who, you know, is off-putting at the same time that he learns to become a team worker. And I would imagine that during the course of the film, you and the director must have worked out, you know, in which scenes to sort of push that social awkwardness or arrogance, and in which scenes to highlight more of the hero in him.
Yes, very much so. But I think a lot of the heavy lifting was done by Graham Moore's first time feature script. I mean, it's quite an achievement. And he's 12 years old. No. He looks 12. I mean, it's unbelievable how sort of puppyish he looks. Amazing. And the first lure when I heard about this script, I was playing Khan and in a very different headspace. And this sort of, you know, what could have been a sort of English-scented rose garden of a script kind of landed with huge kind of heat on it because it was top of the blacklist. And I was intrigued by people of taste who said, you've got to read it, well, including everyone who votes on the blacklist. Let's be honest.
In case you don't know, the blacklist is published every year, the best unmade screenplays. In other words, what people have a lot of interest in because no one actually owns the thing yet.
And it's a lot of work and a lot of reading that goes into it. It's an amalgamation of an incredibly large volume of people who are in the industry or somehow affiliated with that world and have read scripts and vote for them. So it's a huge pool of reading resource. So it's a very thorough examination of material. But it was very exciting to read for that reason alone. But the minute I engaged with it and started that first scene, what I loved about it was how uncompromising it was. There was no vanity about the character. Graham wasn't trying to make you like him. And he was introducing this extraordinary, difficult, diffident, and different man with great humor as well. And that was a real relief, because the minute you're just playing clever for the sake of playing clever or just demonstrating intelligence, it's very dead as drama or as anything that can engage you into a further investigation or interest, I personally feel. And he really avoided that from the get-go for me as a reader. And then you're drawn into this sort of extraordinary thriller of how this man and this odd-fitting man with this equally odd group in this incredibly pressurized time where England is at siege and the war is really tipping in favor of the Third Reich, how on earth is he going to play a part in this when he can't manage being with a group of people? So the two things kind of collide, and you learn how and what he is and why he is at the same time as learning and getting to that eureka moment where they break the code. So there was a beautiful illusion of those two things. And then just being sucker punched, really profoundly by the ending, and just, as I said, not only is this a man who was punished for being true to what he was as a homosexual man in the 50s, and admitting in a police interview after his house was burgled by a rent boy, and he confessed to his homosexuality. Not only that ignominy, being faced with a trial, a very public trial, because he was a public figure as a maths professor at Manchester, not then having disclosed obviously what his role was in the war, because it was still within the confines of the Official Secrets Act, the 35-year vow of silence that people took to honour their country and the work that they did for their country during the war in secret. And not just that, but then to be faced with the choice of 2 years imprisonment or 2 years state-sanctioned chemical castration through weekly estrogen injections. Just beggars belief, and it was less than 100 years ago. And this was the reward that this man who, like I said before, saved the very democracy and government that then turned and punished him. That was what he got. That was the hand he was dealt. And I was so angry, so upset. And that grief was compounded with the realization that why on earth doesn't everybody know this story? Why don't people know about this man? Why is he not on the front cover of textbooks, not just science books, but history books? And why, with Darwin and Newton, is he not a figurehead iconically on one of our, our currency notes, one of our banknotes? He has that level of standing in the scientific community, let alone as an extraordinary human being and a war hero and an unwilling and what am I trying to say? Not unwilling, but he didn't make himself out to be a martyr by being true to who he was, but he has become a gay icon because he was true to his identity, but a quiet hero in that sense as well. And I thought, I have to be a part of this. I really want to tell this story. I had an aching need to try and at least serve his legacy to a broader audience. And so, yeah, I pursued it a little bit. I tracked it as that ugly kind of phrase. That phrase, ladies and gentlemen, means that, I just followed the script. It was with a studio, it was with another actor, and I just doggedly didn't let go of it. I met with Ido and Nora before even Teddy Schwartzman was on board, before Morton Tilden, or any other director had been talked about.
You were on board before
I wasn't on board, but I was on board the idea of being on board. Yeah, in my head, I was already on board. No, but I just thought, I want to try and be a part of this. I really do. So without being sort of stalkerish or weird, I kind of did stalk and be weird. No, I didn't. But I met with them and I talked to them about my understanding of the subject and the period and Alan and what I felt about the story and how important it was for me and the world to know it on a larger scale. And then, it got moved around a bit and became available again, and then the rest sort of unfolded. Morton was keen to talk to me, and we got on very well on a Skype chat, and then really well in person. And I realized very quickly, not only was he a really interesting antidote to mix into the equation of making what is ostensibly a period drama biopic with a thriller and a love story, but also, the great complexities, like I was saying, of Graham's script. But I thought, wow, you're going to bring a Norwegian director who's produced this fantastic work of dark comedic thrill in the shape of Headhunters, a fantastic film of last year, and into the mix. I thought, wonderful. That's a really skewed, atypical, asymmetrical kind of approach. And sure enough, not only did he save it from the potential cliches in my mind and let me breathe and move in the character in a way that hopefully would steer it into complexity rather than cookie cutter obviousness. He also had a profound love of the subject and a wealth of knowledge, had really done his homework, and I felt in safe hands, both as an actor asking the sort of page one questions of who, what, why, how, when, and also the other stuff of, let's go into the social history, the political history, the where is the truth, the anecdotal truth, the historical truth, where are we moving from that, and also just wonderful discussions of, you know, how we make this into a film and what being a filmmaker is on both sides of the camera. So it was a beautiful marriage, really.
And you mentioned Graham Moore. Now, he's also the best-selling author of a novel called The Sherlockian, which was published in 2010, around the same time that you started playing Sherlock. And, you know, I'm curious whether you were familiar with his novel at the time you read the script. No,
I really wasn't.
Okay.
I really wasn't. And I keep on, it's a sort of stab of guilt every time someone mentions it, because I still haven't read it.
Oh, dear.
Which is pretty awkward.
But you know what? You've been so busy doing other things that I think it's all right when you have an off moment in the next 2 years or something.
I will.
And one of the things about this film that I found really well done is the concentric circles of narration, because each time that we go back to 1951 to that police station, we know more.
Yeah.
So it's like very layered, the story. Was the screenplay always like that? In other words, was there the voiceover at the beginning saying, are you listening? You know, are you paying attention? You have no right to judge me until after it's over.
Yes.
Was that all there?
Yes, it was. It was, as far as I can remember, it was pretty much all there. Not much of the structures changed. I mean, I have an aesthetic nervousness about voiceovers. I really do. You know, I have very strong feelings about it, but I think it works. It at least is driven into the narrative. You realize it's something that's extracted from a real moment rather than a device that just sort of floats on top of the film. Although, I thought more than a lot about how much I didn't want it to be a sort of a rich voice narration, which, you know, at times it has to be, because you have to impart a lot of information over very cinematic images of the broader context of the war, the machinery of war, very importantly. Not you know, Morton talks about this a lot in Q&As, and I must pick him up on it, because I feel that there is a lot of human element in those snapshots you get of a wider context outside of those huts in the southeast of England with crossword enthusiasts cracking a code, you know, solving a puzzle. The real players, both at the front and in the Blitz of London, the people who are immediately affected by the outcome of that work, I think are beautifully, if lightly sketched. You know, the people doing the crosswords in the underground station, the tube station, in the friends having a cigarette, not knowing about the imminent U-boat strike and the torpedo that's about to destroy their repose. I mean, I think it's very smart. It's very beautifully done, very deftly done. I can't remember where this question began, sorry.
No, quite right. Whether, you know, the voiceover, because as some of my colleagues and students in this audience know, I have reticence about voiceover narration, because sometimes less brilliant directors use it as a crutch, where basically what should be presented through action and gesture and behavior, you know, or silence, becomes explicated. But here, it's precisely because the voice right away brings in the you. Are you paying attention? I suggested to the audience that it's addressed as much to us as it is to the policeman.
It does bring.
We have to pay attention, because this is not a movie that sort of tells you, hey, Alan Turing was gay, he had this double secret. I mean, basically, we have to discover in the course of the film, and frankly, the detective is our surrogate. You know, we enter with him, and at the end, we cannot judge Alan Turing, because we've learned how much good, how noble his life was, and how ignoble his end was.
Precisely.
And, you know,
I wish I'd said that.
Now, I have to bring this up because 10 days ago or so, we were here after watching The Theory of Everything with Eddie Redmayne on the stage. The fact of the matter is, you played Stephen Hawking. It was your breakthrough role, as far as I understand, in the 2004 BBC film Hawking. And I finally managed to see it. It's very hard to see. I had to join Amazon Prime to be able to finally look at it on a computer. And
That's doing it on the BBC for you.
Right.
And a long time ago.
Yeah, and basically, you know, I have profound admiration for what Eddie Redmayne has done with the theory of everything, but I confess that watching you play that part, I realized, my goodness, you also so incredibly grasped it. And my question, and by the way, it covers only 2 years in Hawking's life. Basically, the meeting with Jane and receiving the diagnosis, beginning to be afflicted by the motor neuron disease, and discovering the vocation with the thesis.
Yeah.
I was curious whether playing Stephen Hawking was some kind of preparation for playing Alan Turing. And I recognize how very different the characters are, but the brilliance, the genius. If not, it's okay.
No, that wasn't a sigh of despair. That was just me thinking. They're very, very, very different people. Stephen is an extrovert, is incredibly sly, quick-witted, sparkly, gregarious. You know, he was somebody whose initiation to university was hampered only by the fact that he was a little younger. I mean, one of the reasons he was not diagnosed until quite far into the first signs of the disease was because, you know, people just dismissed it as drinking. He was keeping up with people who'd returned from national service, so he's surrounded by people older than him. So there was a thing of trying to be even more ebullient than he actually was. But he is and was incredibly colourful. And
did you meet him before playing the part?
Yes. The night before, well, 2 nights before we started filming, there was he felt that everything had been said about him and written about him that he wanted to discuss. So I mean, as I'm sure Eddie told you, and when I met him, he still had movement left in his thumb, so that was a cursor to move on the screen, which had some pre-prepared statements and platitudes, some sort of fixed phrases as well. I mean, I studied it, I was absolutely fascinated by it, and as well as literally picking out words alphabetically. But still, it's a very particular rhythm, and you have to wait a long time to have an answer. So, you know, there were so many things I was, like Eddie, you know, I was dying to ask him, you know, just the thing of being young, what he remembered, what music he first got into, what his favourite drink was, whether there were any games around it, how hard it was to be a cox, you know, his first flirtation with girls. The stuff that men can talk about, or that, you know, you can try to excavate with somebody who is real, cognizant, and has a very rich memory of his early life, as Stephen does. And you couldn't, partly because it was also a glorified script editing meeting. So the first thing we got was a volley of, I don't like those scenes where you're holding your breath under the water in the bath. That's not what happened, you know. So we were just sat there going, oh crap. And I just didn't speak. I really clammed up. I was terrified. And I think, like Eddie, you know, I'd done a lot of research by that point, not for as long as he had to research, but without comparing, this is a weird conversation. You know, Eddie's a really good friend of mine, and this is a part that, you know, he couldn't watch it because obviously he had to make his own stamp on it, which I actually can't wait to see. I'm really, really excited about it. He's a phenomenal actor, and everything he touches is so profoundly investigated and realised, and so inhabited with, you know, a touch paper, sensitive soul, and delicacy. You know, it'll be I know I'm going to love it. He's a masterful actor. Yeah, at the same time, you know, we've been doing round tables and things together, and it's just really weird. And he's talking about it, and he just sort of goes, "Did you must have had the same thing? Did you Benedict?" You know, and just like, "Yeah, no, I did. This is weird. Do we talk about this now? This is awkward." But you know, it was an amazing moment for me as an actor, as I know it has been for Eddie, to both physically transform and connect with this incredible life story. Emotionally as well as physically, he is and remains an inspiration for all of us. And as far as an influence on Alan, well, if you play someone like that, that's going to influence your life full stop. As far as direct comparisons, I do think they're quite slim on the ground. They're very different disciplines. Stephen is a theorist, and Alan was somebody whose theory was made real, was made pragmatic. He had a very lateral and specific way of looking at problems that it often involved language, literally language problems posed to him. Well, the big one where he wrote the first paper on computable numbers that was basically a blueprint for all modern computing that invented this idea of a universal machine called then by Newman the Turing machine in honor of his work in that paper, which we now know as computers, was basically grounded in a question that talked about a mechanical process. And he took literally the words, a mechanical process. How can a machine possibly perform mathematical equations and problems, problem solving, I should say, not just equations, but problem solving. And he worked on stuff like all scientists, great scientists do, that borrow from what's come before. There's a lineage, and obviously, Babbage and Ada Lovelace were at the forefront of that. The idea of software in the form of something binary, literally. He imagined I'm going to keep this brief. And simple, because trust me, I am quite simple. So if you're thinking, oh crap, I need the loo, I'll be quick. Perforated pieces of paper, holes and not holes, marks and not marks, a really simple thing of something and nothing being the question going into this computer, the computer being a mechanism that you can program to tackle the software going into it, which we now call software. I mean, it's extraordinary. This simple idea led to what we now hold in our hands that sends us to the moon, that lands asteroids on satellites, whatever that thing is, on a comet, that wakes us up in the morning, that helps us navigate our way around traffic and communicate by wave that we're going the wrong way, we should take another route. It's profound what he came up with, and that was through an immediate effect of language. Language literally spurred him at that moment. Even in the darkest moments near the end of his life, where he was suffering from the effects of the estrogen injections, he was studying morphogenesis, which is the study of the mutation of cells due to environmental stimuli, and that was happening in his body. This amazing, sexually active, extraordinarily brilliant athlete, I mean, an Olympian-level marathon runner, was experiencing this ravaging effect of this drug. And at the same time, he was externalizing that into our world as science and using it to the good.
Do you think that if Alan Turing had lived...
Stephen does do that, by the way. Sorry. No, because it's interesting. He does do that. Stephen uses his life and his work as well. But what I'm trying to say is that Alan physically built what he theorized with a huge team as well. But so his mind and his work is realized in a very different way, I think, from Stephen's. And as a human being, tortured by a stammer, very internalized sometimes, very evident at others. The gear changes and transitions, I think, in his character were a lot less smooth than they are with Stephen. Despite the huge handicap that Stephen has of the delay in communication, this man has revolutionized, created an entire genre of literature in popular science. I mean, that book that everyone has and tries to read, or at least scans their eyes over the ink of, he then kept working at those ideas in even more lay-friendly versions and spawned an entire industry. And this is a man who it takes a good half an hour to 20 minutes to form a sentence. It's a miracle, and it's one we all benefit from. So. And also, but as a master communicator, but Alan couldn't do that. He couldn't do that. He never wrote the paper that would have put him in line for a Nobel Prize, and he could have done about algorithms. Algorithms that, like I said, crack the code, and we still use in search engines.
Actually, I'm going to share with you just my favorite thing in Hawking. You say this wonderful limerick, which, because many of you were here for the theory of everything, there was a young lady named Bright whose speed was faster than light. She set out one day in a relative way and returned on the previous night. It was a great moment in that film. What I was starting to ask you, because as you're talking about Alan Turing and his legacy, I'm curious, do you believe that had he lived beyond the 1950s, that he would have become a kind of Bill Gates or Steve Jobs? Would he have spearheaded what we now know as the revolutionary aspect of computers in our daily lives?
It's really hard to go into that world of conjecture. Probably not, because he was very focused on work that was, by the end of his life, he was really focused on artificial intelligence and work that was not in vogue, that wasn't a continuation of. If he'd written about the algorithms that he did in his the work on algorithms that he did in his early life and that he used in the code breaking, if he'd expanded on computable numbers, I think then he would have possibly won a Nobel Prize. But even within his own community, he wasn't. He was in a very small way, but not in a sort of public way, held as being one of the titans of the digital age, like the ones you mentioned, like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. Also, he really did shy away from the limelight. He once said to his mother, I wish I'd been born in a time where I could have escaped to a medieval monastery. He wanted a cloistered life. He was sociable. He was an active gay man, and expanded his life and experience of that even beyond his prosecution and persecution into European sex clubs and dances in more tolerant societies. But what I'm saying is, fundamentally, I don't think he was that kind of man that could have become a spokesperson or an icon. Who knows? Who knows? Because also it's about projection. It's about what the society or community you come from elevates you to as well. So it's possible. The most unlikely people end up on the stages talking about stuff.
And sometimes rather articulately.
Thank you.
I know you were worried that I had too many questions, but I'm going to hold off for a second because I know you have an extraordinary number of fans in this audience, and I would not want them to feel that I monopolized everything.
Okay.
And we have microphones because this is being live streamed.
Okay.
So if we have microphones in the audience. Okay, I know a few of you need to leave. Go right ahead, but quickly and quietly. There was one here in the middle and also one on the left-hand side. So we'll start here, pass the microphone along. We'll do this for at least a few minutes because this poor gentleman has flown in, red eye, has to get up at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning for interviews, but we're going to move it along. Go right ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say that, right here.
Oh, hi, sorry.
I find it amazing that you're able to just become the character for whatever, whether it's Hawking, Sherlock, Alan Turing. I mean, it's incredible. You really you blend into that character so well. And actually, next summer, I'm going over to see you in Hamlet. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
See that. So just wanted to.
Thank you.
And is there a
Thank you.
question? Okay.
I'll take that. Thank you very
Well,
much.
I would say Hawking is available on YouTube as well.
Hawking is available on YouTube. Okay, that maybe I hate admitting things like that publicly. Okay, if we could get the microphone to that woman, and also I had said there was one person or two people now on my left. All right, let's go to the left one, and then we'll send the microphone. Or you do have the microphone already? Okay, go right ahead, and then there are two hands there. I can't even see, but go ahead.
Can I go? Okay. Hi.
Go ahead.
I don't know how to hold this.
You're doing fine.
Okay. It seemed to me that you were conflicted about the pardon that Alan Turing was given. On the one hand, I think I read in an interview that you said it was too little too late. In another, I heard you dismiss, was it MP McNally, as a homophobe for voting against it in 2012. I think that was in the Daily Beast at Toronto.
Well, if I was told that someone did vote against it, then I would say that. Yeah, I think.
You know that he is actually a big proponent of gay marriage. That guy.
All the way to
Well, then I stand by what I said. Clearly, I was right.
I was just wondering if you had reconciled your thoughts about it.
He's still a homophobe. He's the one who needs to reconcile his attitude. I don't.
For voting against the party?
I still, and I also still believe it is too little, too late. There was, I've got to remember her name because I've mentioned this enough times that it's getting embarrassing. She's owed so much credit. We wouldn't probably be here talking about this and seeing a film of it if it wasn't for the MP that actually campaigned for his pardon. Now, the fact that she had to do that, I think, is abhorrent, that it wasn't something that happened automatically as a process of looking at the circumstance of thousands of men in that era and wondering how on earth it was that we reached such a fever-pitched McCarthyist level of fear that we turned our prejudice on our own and lumped together the threat of communism with men who were homosexual because of a certain group, the Cambridge spies, that were homosexual. And that really heightened the persecution of homosexual men in the 50s. So when I get angry about it, I get angry about that era. And, there is a context. There were many men who were found out to be communists, who were gay, because it was already something that was driven underground. So it was a very fertile bed for any kind of political dissent of any form. If you're in a country that doesn't tolerate your sexuality and you look to something that potentially is different, that could offer you more humanity in the ideal of communism, then it makes sense that might be we're getting into a huge meta-political mess. Well, I'm getting into a huge meta-political mess by mentioning all of this now, but in a sort of broad way, it seemed to make sense why the fear was there, but it doesn't justify the actions that fear carries out. As prejudice, in any form, it can't be excused. It can be contextualized and understood, and that's good because we can hopefully then correct it and move on to a better place of understanding. So my answer to your question is, it is still, in my opinion, too little, too late, and the only person who should be offering any kind of apology or forgiveness is Alan Turing towards the people who treated him the way that they treated him. He's the only person that has the power to forgive, in my mind, and he can't because we destroyed him. And the legacy of that part of his story for me is the fact that we need to keep a watch out for the fact this is not a period drama in its issues. It's utterly relevant, utterly relevant. You've got a woman who suffers sexual prejudice. She's belittled because she's a woman. She's not given a place at the table or equal pay. That is still the top issue for feminists today. You have nationalism in Turkey, in Greece with the Golden Dawn when it arose, and in the Middle East and in Russia, where the same minorities are scapegoated, and gay men are right at the forefront of that. And this is not, history teaches us sadly about things that we know are still prevalent in our time, and that's because some of it is ingrained in our human instincts, I think, in the same way as conflict and love are ingrained in our instincts as human beings. So it's a really important story for now. It's not just a very sad tale of something that happened then. It's something we can carry forward.
I agree. And actually, I completely agree with you. Is this turned off?
It's on.
I completely agree with you. But I also think that Lord McNally would actually agree with you if you read his reason for voting against the pardon had nothing to do.
We need to, though, move on because I've got a whole bunch of people with microphones over there. So one moment, we'll try to get to everybody if we can. Go right ahead.
I'd like to reiterate the sentiment that the film was both a powerful portrayal of Turing by you and just a brilliant film. But sadly, no film can last forever, and every film has its end. If the film had been, say, 15 minutes longer, was there anything in Turing's life that you wish could have been included in that span of time?
We filmed, we filmed a scene where the policeman comes into the house and discovers his body, and the death scene, the suicide scene, and the solution of cyanide that's been drunk, and some of that residue left on a bitten apple on the bedstand. And it didn't feel right when we were doing it. And it didn't feel right for Bill Goldstein and Morton Tilden in the edit, because what we wanted to leave on was something beyond what you're left with in the moment of jubilation, in a way of consuming their work in the flames of their youth, the image of them just throwing it all away. They've done it, and it doesn't matter because what they've done will live beyond the physical fact of it. So it's a celebration when they're destroying their work in the end. But more importantly, the last scene of his life, chronologically, with Joan, before what then comes, and I'll explain what I mean by that, is about somebody telling him something that he never had told to him in his life, that he did matter, that the fact that he was different and wasn't normal was hugely important to the world and to everybody around him. And no one got to tell him that in his life. So to end it on that note, to have somebody explaining, it was in a way our way of thanking him within the structure of the film and acknowledging our eulogy to him. And then afterwards, what he does is, in a very calm manner, he walks to the door frame, and with a limp, which I can tell you why I gave him a limp, he walks to the door frame and looks at the machine, which is the embodiment of the love of his life, Christopher. And he smiles, and in my mind, what I was saying was, I'm coming to see you now. He turns off the light, walks into the darkness, and that's it. And that's what you see, you know. I think Mawson was pretty spot on in his judgment of that.
And there was a woman here who had the first hand up, so go right ahead.
First off, thank you for bringing Smaug to life for me. It's amazing.
That's all right.
Since you brought so many fictional characters to life and real life characters, if you could pick one fictional character to bring to life, what would it be, and would you play it?
Patrick Melrose, Edward St. Aubyn's hero of a 5-novel series, is an extraordinary character. I'd like to do that. There are a few others, but saying one, it's really hard. I'm really, really crap at doing favourites, to be honest. I'd love to play that part. Yeah, it's a wonderful, beautiful. I mean, he's like a modern Evelyn Waugh. He's a really adept writer, and the prose is so alive with subtext. It's a gorgeous thing to read. You do visualize it when you're reading it, and it's incredibly smart and funny and moving, and that appeals. Beyond that, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay. Does someone already have a mic right now? Okay. I can't see who that is, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hello. I know that you're just such an amazing actor, and you're really good. Hi, I'm up here.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, okay. Thank you. We can't
Hello.
see.
I know that you're just such an amazing actor, and you're really good at inhabiting your characters. And I just was wondering, is there a big relationship between you and writer, you and director, like, of course, you and Stephen Moffat when you're working on Sherlock?
Yeah, of course. But the relation is with the writer is through the material. If you're lucky enough to be working with a living and present writer, it's a fantastic boon to be able to quiz them, to ask them detailed and difficult questions. I've just been very lucky. I've stumbled across the path at the right time of exceptional writers. So it's hugely important. It's a massive part of the artistic kind of collaboration to work with the people that are originating the material that you're writing, that you're performing, and obviously with directors as well, who craft that performance into something that is, performable. I'm sort of waffling, but yeah, I'm just where people are leaving, and you should. Don't feel bad about it. It's very
No,
late,
I
and
think
I probably should
the
too
truth
soon.
is that I have also received a couple of signals from the Benedict Cumberbatch camp, because this poor man has not had sleep in many, many, many hours. And much as we would love to keep you here, probably for at least another hour, because that's the number of questions that seem to be in the audience, I know that we cannot. So I just want to say to you that we are particularly grateful, and if one can use Sherlock Holmes' idea that you can only do reasoning once you have data. You shouldn't theorize before you have the data. You must have the data first. And our data is that The Imitation Game is a superlative film, that your performance is of a caliber that goes even beyond some of the best performances that I've seen lately, and that you have made the extraordinarily generous gesture of spending an hour here with us. And I theorize from that we are not the only ones who are going to appreciate you this year. Academy Awards season's coming, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for joining
My
us
pleasure.
so much.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you.